In the Voice of Russia World Service, welcome to another edition of the Christian Message from Moscow. Today we acquaint you with excerpts from a book by Orthodox clergyman Mikhail Ovchinnikov. After a serious car accident, he experienced multiple clinical deaths. During each one of these, he had very important encounters in the other world, which he scrupulously described in his book. By will of God, despite forecasts of the medics, Father Mikhail survived and now continues to serve at one of the monasteries of the Crimea. Without doubt, everything narrated by Father Mikhail will be of interest and use to all Christians. Father Mikhail begins his book with an address to all the readers.
Respected Christians, brothers and sisters, people still searching and only embarking on the road towards God. After prayer, peruse this modest book I have written. In it, I have described everything that happened to me in the most difficult moments of my life. Without undue eloquence, weary of drawing you into a maze of winding philosophical sapience, let me expound some events that cannot be fathomed by man's mind, analyzing from the Christian aspect my return from nonentity. Let me say in all earnest, this work was very laborious for me, its sinful author.
The car accident occurred on August 23, 1999. Father Mikhail, for some reason he himself cannot explain, lost control of the car and ran into a tree. Witnesses of the incident called an ambulance. The clergyman found himself in the intensive care unit of a local hospital. After taking one look at him, the medics pronounced, "There is little hope for him." A grave cranial injury, concussion, fracture of the base of the skull, and numerous other injuries. He was in a coma, yet at a stage when it was impossible to assess whether the cortex was permanently dead or not. A medical consilium was summoned. Drawing the conclusion that the processes in the cortex were reversible, the doctors made every effort to help the patient recover. However, what was Father Mikhail, who was in a coma, experiencing at the time? This is how he describes it in his book.
It all happened so unexpectedly and rapidly that unfortunately I vaguely recall the actual moment when my body and spirit parted. I recall the sense of ease and lightness, when as though after a deep breath there comes a wonderful sense of liberation from the ill, broken and abused flesh. Gradually, but with distinct clarity, my senses became alert and responded to sounds, colors and forms. I was departing into a remarkably wonderful world where the sense of unreality, a total new and previously unfathomed state, was gathering force. Through a wondrously beautiful light, it was similar to neither lamp nor searchlight flashes, but rather the entire world pierced with rays of life-giving light. My very first moments were accompanied by some church services. There were prayers, chants sung in male voices. There was a pervading sense of something very familiar and dear. Why? It was my spirit holding counsel with my beloved monastery. As I discovered much later, during the 3 most crucial days for me, at the monastery they conducted a ceaseless prayer on my account. So there it is, the real Christian helping hand. Just stop and think how terrible it is that many of our contemporaries have no knowledge at all of the invisible, yet perfectly real force of prayer. While I can testify that the words of prayer, and particularly at such crucial and difficult moments, accompanied me as I lay helpless, gently supported me, guiding me, and instilling in me this sound conviction that God's power is invincible. At the same time, I had a clear understanding of my corporal sinful weakness, yet alongside me was the invincible strength of the Lord's merciful help. Afterwards, I began to sense the subtlest nuances of music. These were church chants, the beauty of which human speech cannot describe. This was no earthly or even church choir, even of superlative professionalism. My spirit was perfectly aware that these were songs of heavens. I had never heard anything of the sort on earth. That what I had seen beyond the invisible line separating me from life on earth was such that all the accumulated force of human talent could never even come close to achieving this unearthly kingdom of perfection. Let me dwell in great detail on the light that my spirit came into contact with in the first moments of transition to a different world. As an artist by profession, I noticed that these unearthly, crystal silver and gently golden shimmering hues embraced such subtle shades, the likes of which no master of oil and canvas could ever hope to convey, whatever his talent. I recall how, upon gazing at the heavenly light, the following words suddenly came to my mind. Describe in words the immortal Favorean light. In all honesty, it is very hard for me to describe in words all that I saw. The human vocabulary lacks the words that could aptly do justice to the sensations I experienced in the other world. Gazing at the space, shimmering with a myriad of seemingly unapparent yet palpable and perceptible wondrous shades of color, I unwittingly thought that my unworthy eyes were gazing at the breathing and living world of God. The sensation was as if this colorful world was indeed throbbing with life. Besides, right from it I was receiving answers to questions that were tormenting me. Reflecting on this vision of the Lord's universe, I was struck by the realization that we all earthly people live wrongly, and due to our sinfulness do not fall into step with this joyous rhythm of life, this invisible universal breath created at God's will. While the great Christian zealots, in my opinion, through tireless, prolonged prayer, elevated themselves to this lofty appreciation of the rhythm of the Lord's light, let us recall the Venerable St. Seraphim of Sarov and St. Sergius of Radonysh, the great elders of Optinapustin, modern-day martyrs of the Christian faith. Many people testified that, at moments of fervid prayer, a lofty spiritual exertion from the faces and bodies of the great saints, even in their lifetime, there emanated an unearthly radiance. Already after my recovery, in the book The Lord's Judgment, I read about the visions of Grigory, a pupil of Saint Basil the New Tsaregradsky. At that hour, he wrote, all earth and all air on it was caught up in snowy flames, and this miracle continued for a length of time, and the flame rose up to the heavens, and there descended from the heavens an endless number of God's settlements, with wondrously beautiful God's churches and chambers. And there was heard a ceaseless noise of jubilant rejoicing, the cry of endless spiritual rejoicing. There one finds ceaseless peace, inexhaustible joy, eternal jubilation, everlasting feast, the eternal Easter. How amazing that these words spoken so many centuries ago echoed my own sentiments. Yet again I was able to receive confirmation that man could never have invented all this at will. The sense of happiness that I, in my unworthiness, came into contact with at so dire a moment in my life does not leave me to this day. A joy, a prayerful lightness, and endless peace. Glory to the Lord for all this. The doctors told me that they were amazed at how in my unconscious state I kept exclaiming, "What joy!" What joy could there be, they thought, when he is in so critical a condition? Then there began my encounters in this wondrous unearthly place. I met only with deceased, close and important to me. My encounters were very clear and distinct, conscious and sensible, and imbued with important revelations and information for me. At this point, one very important question needs to be answered, according to many. Was my body at that moment indeed beyond life? Here is the opinion of Venerable Zealot of the 5th century, John Cassian. Often a dying person begins to experience spiritual visions before death, and whilst still seeing everyone and everything around them, and even in conversation with them, this person can see that which the others are oblivious of. The first person I encountered was my deceased spiritual father, former secretary of the Dnepropetrovsk Eparchy, Archpriest Konstantin Ognenko. His face, as always, joyous, wearing a smile. "So, our elder has made his appearance," he said. "A bit early for you." However, sad is an earthly expression which does not reflect what actually happened, for in fact, my spiritual father and I communicated in silence, gazing into each other's eyes. Now I know that our earthly expression about the eyes being a mirror of one's soul isn't accidental. It finds its explanation in the Holy Scripture. Remember, in chapter 6 of the book of Matthew, verses 22 and 23, we read, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is clear, so all your body shall be full of light. And if your eye is ill, then so all your body shall be dark." At moments when man senses his own sinfulness, he feels embarrassed to raise his eyes to his interlocutor. This happens because he unwittingly realizes that his guilt is reflected in his eyes. O Lord, give us strength so that our eyes may be filled with pure light of love and truth, so that we might not be embarrassed to lift our eyes to other people. Thus, with the deceased Father Konstantin, we mentally exchanged information, gazing into each other's eyes. I didn't feel any hardship from this unusual means of communication. Quite obviously, our spirits are well adapted for such exchange. However, our conversation was in no way like a secular one. All the while I was held to answer for my spiritual steps. In clear, concise and direct form, we discussed the order of my life. There was no means of avoiding or skirting something unpleasant for me. The communication proceeds as naturally as a body's breathing. And man cannot, after all, breathe slightly or just in part. Just as fully as we inhale and exhale here on earth, so in the other world we shall exhale all the mistakes we have committed. Often during conversation with Father Konstantin, I felt my spiritual mentors chagrin and at times joy. Yet there were no reproaches, no praise. All was smooth and measured in our conversation. While for me it was perfectly clear what I had done right in my life and what wrong, or not quite right. How one clergyman of my acquaintance once correctly put it, listening to my account, it was the encounter of a pupil who had written an exam paper with his teacher. Often I myself didn't like my answers as a pupil. I was gripped by terror when I realized that the dark forces of the devil would soon be upon me with these same questions, presenting scrolls with an account of all my sins. With trepidation, I conveyed all this to my beloved Father Konstantin, only to hear in response the serious and joyous words, "That is truly wonderful that you have understood it all in time. And now, return back to earth, where tasks and people await you. To the end of your days, remember what you saw here, and share this with other people." He made me turn in the direction from whence I had come, and I felt his friendly slap on my back, although I realized that there could be neither back nor hand in our earthly understanding of them there. So, with a smile and understanding and kind fatherly edification, Archpriest Father Konstantin Ognenko met me there in the other world, and later returned me back here. Afterwards, people asked me how those I communicated with were dressed. I must say that during my encounters in the other world, I have but vague recollections of vestments worn by them. Perhaps silvery shimmering robes and capes. My mind and attention were preoccupied with other matters. During other transitions of my spirit to the other world, I experienced a tender encounter with my deceased mother. Exhausted here on earth by a terrible fatal illness, she never strayed off her course to God. Now I saw her in a radiance that I find impossible to express in mere words. We both longed to stay together, but, foreseeing my question, she said with conviction, "There is no Lord's blessing for that. Go back. Be strong. Work hard. It will be both difficult and painful for you there now." Her eyes, the eyes of a loving mother, exuded silent grief, since she could envision the terrible sufferings I was yet to experience on the sickbed. But I didn't hear from Mother any of the sighs and ohs and ahs that sympathy is traditionally accompanied by on earth. I also encountered other spiritual people in the other world, my acquaintances and relatives, but they are of personal significance and cannot be of interest to the general reader. What amazes me today, looking back, is the succession of my spiritual encounters in the Lord's world. First my spiritual father, and only then my mother.
You were listening to excerpts from a book by Orthodox clergyman Father Mikhail Ovchinnikov, who after a car accident experienced multiple clinical deaths. In his book he gives an account of his encounters in the other world. In the following program we shall continue to acquaint you with this book entitled Between Life and Death. And there we end another edition of the Christian Message from Moscow. It was directed by Vladimir Dumin, editor and author of the musical framework Tatiana Shvitsova, sound engineers Nadezhda Smirnova and Elena Gashennikova, and your hosts Svetlana Yakimenko
and Pavel Novichkov. All the very best to you.
May God save you from all evil, visible and invisible.